Is the men's class, and the ladies are over in the chapel, I guess, is where they are. And this morning we have a very special, and when I say special, go ahead and let that short yellow bus special enter your mind. Wayne Roberts. I've known Wayne since, I wish I hadn't known Wayne as long as I do, but I've known Wayne forever. If you do not know who Wayne Roberts is, you're either going to be in for a very special treat or a very frightful ride, one of the two. Wayne and Tammy are very special to this church, very special to people my age who sort of took us under their wing when we first came here. Terry and I came here over 30 years ago, Wayne, and nobody had kids except the Roberts, so we all looked to the Roberts for an example as to how to raise our kids, and unfortunately all of our kids have turned out so-so. Yes, kind of just like your kids. So, it's been great. Wayne and Tammy used to sit right back here with their 5 kids, and Terry and I would talk about whether or not we wanted to sit behind them during service or not, because sometimes we were up for the entertainment, and then sometimes we thought we needed to focus a little bit more, so we would circle around. But Wayne and Tammy are just awesome people. Have had lots of experience with a lot of different areas. I know Wayne and Tammy are here to share those. I don't want to take up much more of Wayne's time. Wayne can talk from now till when the Lord comes and beyond. He'll still be talking when we get there. Jesus may have to tell him to bring it down a little bit. But anyway, love them to death. People that have had struggles, have had problems, we always know that we can go to Wayne and Tammy and they can relate to our problems. They can relate to a lot of people, and it's a great counseling service. So without much further ado, when you do get to meet Tammy, tell her that you're praying for her because of Wayne, and we'll turn it over to you, Wayne. I appreciate the effort and the time, and glad to have you here today, brother.
Because he won't turn me off when he's done listening. Everybody else here will. I will just tell you, Wayne, I thought for sure that Wes was going to tell you his and Terry's plan. Every time they started talking about having kids, they would come to our house. And that squelched that. Hence the reason, I guess, Tammy and I are not here talking about parenting. We're still working on all that. It's a very special, I don't like to say honor. It's a very special blessing to be here and to have in front of me guys and later gals that mean so much to us. And we're, in fact, partially responsible for our children and the way they're raised. In fact, Tammy and I use that often as the excuse for why they turned out the way that they did. We did our best, but when we have people like Murphy and Height and Autry and others who influence them, I mean, what are you gonna do? I appreciate the fact that all of you men came in and sat down exactly where your wife told you you were supposed to sit. It's always great to see that the guy has this look on his face like, if she comes back in here and I'm not sitting where I'm supposed to, I'm going to be in trouble. So you've already taken the first step into a better marriage, and that is, don't leave where she puts you. So I'm glad that you're here for that. We're going to take about 40 minutes or so. We've got a lot of information that we could share about marriage. And when Corey and I spoke about this sometime back, I said, what do you want? And he said, well, we do a 5th Sunday special speaker that we have in on a particular topic. He just told me a minute ago they're changing it. They're going to call it the Bottom of the Barrel Sunday. I don't know what that's all about, but the idea is that we could focus on something special. And so he asked me, and then we added Tammy in the class with the ladies to talk about marriage. That's what Tammy and I have been doing as our primary ministry for the last 10 years. Previous to that, we were in Parker, Colorado, here in the Denver area for 16 years. And before that, we were here for 11 years where I served as the deacon of communications and alongside of some great folks that make this church really good. And so marriage, family, parenting has been all of what we have been spending our time. Tammy and I just figured about 168 of those marriage and parenting seminars over the last 10 years. And I will just tell you, as glad as we are to be here, we were more glad last week. Because last week we were hosting our third marriage seminar at sea cruise in the Western Caribbean. And it's nicer there. The people aren't as nice, but it's nicer there. I just want you to know that. I got up this morning and remembered why we moved. So here's what we're going to do is this afternoon, we're going to talk about some of the struggles, some of the challenges, some of the obstacles that we face in marriage. But if you will, this morning I'd like us to kind of create a bit of a baseline. When Tammy and I named our seminar His Shoes, Her Shoes, it wasn't just to be a moniker, it wasn't just to be catchy, it wasn't just so that we could have a great logo. It came from a perspective where Tammy and I, simply put, we had an epiphany, a revelation, if you would, and I just need to share this background to give you kind of some foundation of where we're going today. Tammy and I have had our ups and our downs. We've had some downs that were really big downs, and currently we're riding high with some things that are really, really good. But Tammy, some of you know this about Tammy. This is how I get up in the morning. I don't need much time becoming beautiful. You know, Mike Ripperton and I, we share the same blessing, and that is our face is the face, same face all the time. Tammy needs a lot of preparation to be beautiful, apparently. A couple hours this morning, actually an extra because our clocks were set not to change from Mexico ship time, and so we got up at 5:30 instead of 6:30 this morning, which means we'll be going to bed at our usual old people time of 4:30 instead of 5:30. But Tammy goes with 5 kids. We had a pretty deliberate regiment, and at 10 o'clock every night, Tammy would go off to the bathroom to take her bath. She still does to this day. Sometimes she sings, sometimes I hear her laughing, sometimes I hear her in there weeping. I don't know what all goes on in there. And then she comes out. But when Tammy comes out, the bath has impacted her natural curly hair. It has become naturally kinky. And Tammy takes out her contact lenses. She has this pair of glasses that she got in the 3rd grade that she puts on. But because she's trying to keep up with me in age, she has another pair of glasses that she puts on in front of the other glasses. And so Tammy will come in about 11 o'clock, and I'm exhausted. I'm ready to go to bed. With very few exceptions, we've always gone to the bed at the same time. And so Tammy says, I'm not tired, I'm going to sit up and read. She's got this gigantic book about fairies and vampires or something that she's reading. It's got a book light on it, which doesn't illuminate the page. It just shines directly in my eye as I'm trying to go to sleep. 2 pairs of glasses, kinky hair. And in this, I don't want to tell tales, but in this particular phase of life, she gets out of the bath really hot, so she doesn't want to get more hot, so she puts on kind of this lightweight nightgown, but she doesn't want to get cold, so she puts on flannel. It's a layered thing. It's very complex. And all of you young guys, I'll just wait till your wife gets to that stage. I don't want to spoil the surprise. So anyway, I'm laying in bed. I'm looking up at her. She leans over. She kisses me. She says, I love you. I slobbered out something that sounded kind of like, I love you, or I'll have a few. I don't know what it was. And I looked up and saw this gal, and I thought, the goofiest gal I've ever seen in my life. But I was glad that she was my goofy gal. I'm glad that she's my wife. I'm glad that she's the mother to my children, the grandmother of my grandchildren. I'm glad she intersected my story. I'm glad she's my wife. And here's where the revelation came. What if, in fact, I wasn't her husband, she wasn't my wife, but I was her husband? What if it isn't that she's not the mother of my children, but I'm the husband, the father of her children? There's a husband, a father, a mother, sister, brother. I'll get this all sorted out. But what if, in fact, it was I who intersected her story and I've become part of her life? Now, that sounds like that's just semantics, but it really was a turning point in our marriage relationship. Though our relationship, for the most part, had been good, I had always looked at it and lived it from my perspective. My hopes, my dreams, my wants, my desires, my life. So the next morning I told Tammy, and I said, I need to apologize. I don't think I was mean. I don't think I was controlling or oppressive, but I'd only looked at our relationship from my perspective. And I said, with what time God will give me, I want us to look at our marriage from each other's perspective. No pun intended, but to put ourselves in each other's shoes and try to understand better what it means to be a husband and to be a wife, but from the other perspective. And I'm not here to give some kind of a testimony, but I will tell you, it changed our marriage in ways I really can't articulate, even if I can talk till kingdom come. So I want to share a little bit about our role as a husband, and Tammy's sharing some of those things with the ladies this morning. And then I want to turn it, and I want to talk a little bit about the not so easy job, the role that our wife has to play within our marriage. And I hope as we leave this morning's class time that, well, simply put, that you'll have a greater appreciation for the role that your spouse plays. Because I'm convinced that if you can have that kind of a perspective in your marriage relationship, it changes everything, and it changes everything for the better. So let's see if we can't break down the role. When my dad was preaching, he would come in when I was very little, and he would kick off his shoes, and I remember putting my feet in his shoes, and I would shuffle along the floor. I was pretending like I was dad, even though I knew that those shoes weren't mine. I couldn't fit in them, or at least they were too big for me. But it wasn't until much later that I realized how big my father's shoes really were. Because God has given us as husbands incredibly large shoes to fill. It was a Saturday morning. We were living in Aurora, Colorado, in what I commonly refer to as the prison apartment. A block building with few windows and inmates on either side. That's how it was in those days. And we had been married about 6 months. A little backstory for those of you who don't know. When Tammy and I first met, she was pregnant, though she did not yet know it. And so when I got married, I had a 6-month-old. So on the moment I said, I do, I became a husband and a father. And so 6 months later, it's a Saturday morning, I remember like it was yesterday, I sat straight up in bed, I'm not exaggerating, beads of sweat running off of my head, and this thought went through my mind. What have I done? The echoes of my saintly mother, who just a few weeks, Tammy and I started dating the end of February, we were married the end of June. That's how short our courtship, dating, relationship, spending time together lasted. My mother had said, we love little Josh and we love Tammy, but are you ready for this? And what does Mr. 20-year-old say? Of course. How hard can that be? I felt like Abraham Lincoln when facing putting the Union back together, and he said, I am inadequate for the task that lies before me. And I'll just tell you, there has probably not been a day that to some extent I've not had that feeling. Because the shoes that God gives us are enormous. First of all, God slides out this gigantic pair of dress shoes, and he calls us to be the spiritual head, the spiritual leader of our family. I picked dress shoes because my dad was a preacher, and so we had 3 kinds of clothes: school clothes, play clothes, church clothes. A little confusing. You weren't supposed to play in your school clothes, but sometimes the play clothes were last year's school clothes. There was a gray area there, but we knew about our church clothes, right? We knew not to be caught playing in our church clothes, and for us, that was usually a little white shirt, a black or blue tie, and those iconic black shoes that our parents made us polish every Saturday night watching Hee Haw and Lawrence Welk. I mean, it was a regular sweatshop, right? I don't know why God has called you and I to be the spiritual head of our household. I could tell you right now that Tammy would be a better spiritual leader. Women typically seem to be more spiritual than we are. They have ladies' days and ladies' retreats and ladies' class. Saw a church up in Iowa that was trying to fix that. They had guys, guns, grub, and God Day. I mean, bless their heart, they're trying, John, to do what they're supposed to do. She's a better Bible student. She's a better prayer warrior. If you were in there, you'd find out she's a much better Bible teacher than I am. I think I could make the case before God. I know that Eve was created for Adam, and I know that she's the first to eat of that tree, but Lord, look at Tammy. Doesn't that say she would be better? But God doesn't relent on that. He says, I've called you to be. Appreciate what one author in a book on male spiritual leadership said. He said, it may very well be that God simply knew that we weren't inclined to be spiritual, and so he had to give us an assignment to be spiritual. That we had to be assigned to be spiritual so that we would take that job. Unfortunately, too often we are derelict in that duty. But you know how men are. They'll try anything even if they know that they can't do it. You can ask Dean Murphy about me going hunting. I can't, but I tried. Fortunately, he is still living to tell the tale. So we suck in our gut, we stick out our chest, we put our foot in those dress shoes, and off we go. And God says, but wait, there's more. Like this is like an infomercial here, right? And God slides out in a pair of work boots, and he says, you are to be the primary provider for your family. On Monday morning, when your alarm goes off, don't be mad at your boss. Don't be mad at your wife. Don't be mad at your alarm clock. Be mad at Adam because he messed it up for all of us. God was going to do all the providing, but Adam just chose not to take his role, and he ate of the tree that was forbidden, and God said, it's going to be different now, and you're going to work. By your sweat now will the ground give up its crop. But it's not limited to simply being the financial provider. And maybe I need to step aside for just a moment and say this. It doesn't mean that a wife can't work. It doesn't mean that she couldn't even be the primary support for that family. It doesn't mean that maybe it doesn't have to be for a time because of circumstances or training or opportunity. That it's even a Mr. Mom arrangement. That is that husband stays at home while the wife is working. But what it means is at the end of the day, the buck stops at your desk. It is your responsibility to provide not only financially for your family, but it is the responsibility to provide for all of their needs. In fact, to simply provide for their financial needs and to negate or forget the other needs would make you one who failed in your responsibility. They are equally, and maybe even at times, are of greater importance. Now, you may not know it by looking at me, but I'm not the greatest provider. When Tammy and I were first married, she had just bought a brand new car, a Chevy Chevette. Okay, not really a car, but it was new, and it was her after 36 months. And so I drove from Lakewood, where we lived, across to out by the old Stapleton Airport, I-70, and about Peoria, every single day. And it was a day much like today that I was on my way home. I-70 become slick, and I remember navigating those streets in that little car that was like driving a clown car down the street. But it got me to and fro. But one day I came out at work into the parking lot of the company I was working for, and somebody had stole the Chevette, right? I called the police, and I said, somebody stole my car. He said, make and model. I said, Chevy Chevette. He snickered just a little bit, and I said, it's a car. He said, name and license plate. And he goes, your car hasn't been stolen. I said, yeah, it's not that big of a parking lot. He goes, your car has been repossessed. Apparently, monthly payments means every month, okay? We were just at that phase where we often rob Peter to pay Paul and just happened to run out of apostles. I mean, it wasn't the best time. We got the Chevette back. You decide if that's a blessing or a curse. But I'm not always. Tammy's the saver. Tammy's far more content. Tammy would be better at managing the finances and probably better if she was inclined to it, earning them. She would be a great worker, and there are plenty of Mondays that I have pled, God, Tammy, send her to work, right? But God doesn't relent on that. So we put our foot in that dress shoe, and we put it in those work boots, and off we go. And God says, but wait, there's more. And he slides out in front of us a pair of combat boots, and he said, you are to be the protector of your family. I draw this from what the Apostle Peter wrote when he was discussing about slaves and masters and citizens and their government and husbands and wives, where he talks about the wife being the weaker vessel. Now, for 5 years, I lived in Oklahoma, and I went to, as they call it there, the Walmart. Not all women are fragile and frail. I'm just going to leave it right there. But that's not what Peter was talking about when he called us to be the protector and described her as weaker. If you go to the Denver Art Museum here, downtown Denver, one of the premier art museums in the United States, they have this vase on a pedestal. They call it a vase over there. And it's on this pedestal, and it's got a glass case over it, and there's an alarm. There's a big burly guard that stands there watching over it. If you were to get past it, that is the guard, the alarm, the glass, and knock that ceramic out onto the marble floor, do you know what happens? It breaks because it's fragile and frail. But at the same time, if you went to the Walmart and around upcoming holiday, February 14th, mark it in your calendar, best marriage advice I can give you, Valentine's Day, don't forget it, okay? And you were to knock one of those vases off that they have there, do you know what happens to it? It breaks. Somebody's thinking bounce. It doesn't bounce, it breaks. Why? Fragile and frail. He isn't saying our wife's a vase, he's saying our wife's a vase. She's to be elevated, she's to be held on a pedestal. In fact, the thrust of the passage says if you walk in one day and for no good reason she's mad, stick out your chest and just let her pound away. That's what you're there for. You're there as her protector, but unfortunately in so many households, the husband is not the protector, he is the chief adversary. It is the complete opposite of what he's called to be. God says I know you're thinking, Wayne, that's easy for you, right? Being the lean, clean, fighting machine that you are. But I've taken that journey that all of you have, carrying that flashlight with 12 batteries around the apartment because somebody is in the room, right? You've done all that? That's just stupidity. That makes you brave. Stupid makes you brave. But the idea is that God calls us. So we look at these big shoes. We put our feet in the dress shoes. We put our feet in the work boots. We throw those combat boots over our shoulder like a continental soldier. And God says, but wait, there's more. And we look and we say, with all the reverence the divine deserves, you've got to be kidding me. Now what? Slides out the biggest pair of shoes that there is. In fact, so big that I don't have an illustration for it. Besides another shoe illustrations, probably lost on a group of men. He says you're to be the friend, the lover, and the companion. I said, I don't know how to do that. I can't do any of that. And some men, they hang their heads, they spend their entire marriage life frustrated with the fact that they can't do it. And some of them say, I can't do it, and I won't do it, and I'm out of here. And they leave. And the reason why is because we keep trying to fill those shoes by ourselves. The fact is that God gave us two resources to help us fill those shoes, and the first, though, is our wife. The woman that's sitting in that other room, listening diligently to what it means to be a godly wife and how she can be better at it, and we are so quick to keep her at arm's distance. Her counsel, her prayers, her help. The very fact that she has called to be, as we would translate from the Hebrew, not just helpmeet, but our ezer, our strength. You know, that Ebenezer, stone of strength. It's that same root. The idea is what? She is our strength. She is that which makes up the difference. I remind you that when God looked at the world and said, it's good, he looked at Adam and said, not so much, right? It's not so good that man should be alone. Something is lacking. You cannot accomplish your full potential and purpose without a woman by your side. Sidebar, if you're single, God still loves you. You still can be acceptable to God. Heaven still awaits as a reward for your faithfulness. But I'm convinced that a man will never reach his full potential without that woman by his side. Otherwise, it would be okay. It would be good for a man to be alone. That's our job. And then God gives us his power. He gives us the example of his son. He gives his providential care. He gives his constant guidance. guidance. And the reason that the task of being the man becomes so difficult sometimes, simply put, we keep trying to do it ourselves. I have a size 6.5 foot. 7 if I don't trim my toenails, okay? When I went into full-time ministry about 25 years ago, I wanted a pair of preaching shoes, leather dress shoes. I went into the shoe store and everybody mocked me for my tiny ballerina feet with something like, we don't have anything less than an 8. And I said, you know what, give me an 8 and point me to the hardware store because I'm going to get a ball-peen hammer and beat that till my foot swells to fit. Because I'm trying to do that in my own life, right? We beat ourselves up. We come on Sundays and hope the Bible class teacher will beat us up. Preacher will beat us up. In fact, if you can imagine, there are some churches that will bring somebody all the way from Texas to come in and beat us up till we swell to fit the gigantic shoes when God said, I never intended for you to do it by yourself. I am here and I have provided you a great resource to accomplish that. Big shoes, but they're not the most difficult shoes in the closet to wear. The most difficult shoes to wear, I said I've got a size 6.5, which means that Tammy and I wear the exact same size of shoes. It makes it nice when we dress in the dark. Doesn't matter whose pair you get, you know it's going to fit. Unless it's Sunday and I find myself in high heels, and simply put, guys, I don't have the legs for it, okay? But can you imagine spending your entire day in a high heel shoe? I mean, the thing's not even shaped like a human foot, right? Getting in and out of a pickup truck, climbing a ladder, standing on a warehouse floor, walking across the parking lot covered in snow, oversaturated yard. I don't want any part of that. Well, God slid out in front of our wife, I think, one single pair of shoes. And yes, they're big to feel, but they are tight, they are constraining, and they are difficult to wear. And they are the shoes of submission. Unfortunately, the term submission has come to fall with some disdain on the ears of some. That it means inferior or weaker or oppressed. That could not be further from the truth. In fact, the word that we translate as submit or submission comes from a Greek word that means to organize, as in military fashion. It was used, a word that was used of men when they would find their place in military service. And as such, by definition of those who do far greater work in the Greek than I do, it is a choice action of one who surrenders themselves to the authority of the other for the well-being by carrying on a greater burden. So here we have a woman that was created in the image of God. That's what the text says. She also, as part of mankind, was given oversight of the entire world. That, if you will, she takes a half step back, often, in our opinion, into the shade of our cape, right? We'll be the superhero. Her job is to sit back there when the wind blows and brush it out of her face. We're the master. She's the slave. We're in charge. She's the employee. All those kind of perspectives that are wrong, that say and somehow she is a lesser than we are, don't be fooled by that perspective. Now, I don't have to just tell you that. I can prove it divinely. In Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 8, the Apostle Paul, encouraging the saints in Philippi to think of the things or the well-being of others over oneself, he sets before them the supreme example. He sets before them the example of Jesus Christ, who, as Paul says, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking on the very appearance and the very nature of man. Some have searched that scripture wondering what exactly Jesus emptied himself of. I'll just tell you, if that was the purpose, Paul missed the mark. But this is what I do think he says. That Jesus Christ is the creator and the sustainer of all things. Read the first couple of chapters of the book of Colossians. It was created for his purposes. It does not happen without his direct involvement. He was the alpha of all alphas. He accounted to no one. He needed no one. He was responsible to no one, responded back to no one. He was the top of the ladder, but he said, for man to be saved, I'm going to have to take on bodily form. Off comes the crown, down goes the robe and scepter. He leaves like a king who walks amongst the kingdom. He puts on the filthy rags of humanity, and though he is sinless, he looks like us. He acts like us, except for the sin. He finds himself challenged, tempted, and even hurt the same way as us. But you know what? He stayed king that whole time. There are some that suppose that Jesus, when he took on the form of flesh, that he became a less God. Can't be a less God. Can't be a part God. Can't be a lower G God. In fact, the grammar of the text tells us, remember we were in school, we did that past, present, future tense, right? I ran, I am running, I will run. That all works unless you're in Oklahoma or you're Yoda. He always changes that up. I don't know how he's so wise when he can't understand English syntax. But anyway, that's not the way it is with Greek. There's other tenses, and the particular tense of this word existed in the form of God doesn't imply that he was something. But it would be wrong in the grammar to say, although he exists in the form of God, speaking of a past condition, but it means this. He is God in the past. He is God in the present. He is God in the future. He was never anything less. He did not get demoted, and yet he took on a submissive role. He took a half step back. He took the role of a human being to accomplish the purpose of God, and that's what our wives do when they put on the shoes of submissiveness, is they take that half step back. Are they capable to operate without us? Bad news, yeah. Did God create them independently valuable? Yes. Did God make them an important part of us? Uh-huh. She may be smarter. She may be more contented. She may be more spiritual. We know they're better looking than us. But she turns over her life, if you will, to our oversight, to our care, to our guidance. That's not easy to do. I'm pull myself up by my own bootstraps, don't take advice from anyone. I like to be me. I like everything from my name to my initial to being in charge. In fact, I often say that with men, it's like, you want me to be the spiritual head? I will stand at the spiritual helm, right? You want me to be the provider? Hunter, gatherer, very manly, right? You want me to be the protector? All right, ma'am, I'll take it from here. Well, if you've ever tangled with Tammy, our rule at our house was, Tammy, please don't get me beat up, okay? I'm just telling you, I can take any one of you out here in the parking lot and take a whooping. I've got practice, right? But you don't want to mess with her. She may be far more capable, but she takes that submissive role. Why? Because God calls her to fulfill that responsibility. It used to be that Bear Valley had an old blue van. It was a dangerous thing. That's why we only allowed the youth to ride in it, okay? Because we didn't care about them. We could make more of them, right? So, but at a particular time while I was in school here, one of the students, a friend of mine, was driving the van as the church had loaned it to him. And my family had one car, family of 7, and it broke down. And George said, you drive the van. In fact, I think maybe at that point, he had bought the van from the church. You know, it's like, I don't want to say anything. We give the rickety old vehicle to the teens, and when we don't think it's safe for them anymore, we sell it to preacher students. Okay, so that's what we do with that. And George says, you can borrow the van. And so I'm pulling up here to this church building right out here on the side driveway, and a little old lady, bless her heart, steps right out in front of me. I apply the brakes of the vehicle to feel the pedal go all the way to the floor. The master cylinder was leaking, and I could not get hydraulic pressure. So I did what's natural to all men. I just started pumping that, right? I think if a man drives off a cliff, he will pump the brakes to the bottom, thinking he ultimately is going to get it to stop. Finally, it stops, and maybe time has changed it, but I feel like she turned, and her nose just took the dust off of that grill. I bent the steering wheel over. My kids have dug into the naga hide seats and all that. Now, I could just tell you right now that this morning you might have got up and your car didn't want to go. Might even told you that. Sometime in Colorado, cars will go, click, click, click. And you get mad because the car won't go. Let me just tell you, a car that stops is equally of value, right? It is important to know that you and your wife, though very different, we'll talk a little bit more about this at 4 o'clock, but that you are different, that's a good thing. And she has taken this role of submission. Let me see if we can get past kind of keep an eye out on the time here. I mean, we're going to stop whenever I stop, but what time do you stop here? Okay, shepherds, Corey knows when to stop. He just chooses not to. You see, you put yourself out there on that one, Corey, saying, I know. So here's the thing is, it's not easy. So you get past the gender for just a moment. Jesus Christ is described as the groom of the church of which you and I are part. We're the bride. We're the wife. And he is perfect in every way. He submitted himself even to the point of death for our well-being. He's never lashed out in unwarranted anger. He's never been self-serving, though he was deserving of nothing but our adoration. He is the perfect husband. And maybe I'm speaking for you and I shouldn't, but I'm speaking for me. I find it hard sometimes to submit to him, even when the submitting to him is for my well-being and my good. Meanwhile, we have our wife, and she surrenders herself. She submits to us. Oh, yup, 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 yup. I mean, I just imagine that God creates Eve. She looks over at Adam. He's been standing there seeing what all is going to happen. He just figured out that this finger goes in this nostril. You know, that's just kind of the guy. And she surrenders and submits herself to us. Do you think that that's easy? When God said of the woman, your desire will be for your husband, but he will rule over you. That doesn't mean that, well, you're going to want your husband and that's punishment enough. What he says is you're going to want to be the husband. You're going to want to be the man. You're going to want to be the leader. You're going to want to wear the pants in the family. It is going to be your daily challenge because I created you with the ability to do that. But submission is a demonstration of that love I often call sacrificial love, but that's not a fair term. There is no real, genuine love that isn't sacrificial. Love is the choice action that seeks the well-being of another over one's self. It is putting her always before me. And she finds herself in that position of submitting to the guy who fails so often on that. It's not easy. Suppose this morning, if I asked you, what shoes is your wife wearing this morning? Most of you would go, maybe snow boots. One of you would come up with ugly gray clogs. That's all she ever wears, right? I'll tell you what she wears. She wears the shoes of submission. And they are beautiful shoes. They're beautiful because they reflect her submission first and foremost to the God who has called her to take that particular role, even though it's tough, even though it's hard, even though at times it's constraining. That's what she wears. That's why she surrenders. She doesn't surrender to you because you're worth it. She doesn't surrender it to you because you're deserving. Doesn't even surrender it to you because you love her. She surrenders it because she, if you will, is surrendering to far greater authority, and that is a beautiful pair of shoes. but they are hard to wear. But I note for you that when Jesus humbled himself, became a man, lived that perfect life, ultimately died on a cross, and then resurrected, that God retrieved him back into himself and glorified him, because that's what he wanted of him, that our God sees her shoes as beautiful. If the shoe thing not working for you, it's that buck just a few hundred yards away that turns broadsided. You see it in your sight, and it says, I'll just stand here and see if you can hit me. Kind of beautiful. It's that Colorado stream. You're there. Only thing is you and that 18-inch rainbow trout that is looking for exactly the lure you put at the end of your fly line. It is that helicopter shot down the 18th fairway at Augusta. You know the one, Wes, that always brings a tear to his eye. It's that kind of beautiful. You ever been down here to Cabela's? You ever been down here to the Boat Cathedral at Cabela's? It's in the back of the store, those of you, it's glassed-in cathedral, rays of angelic sunlight. You can hear the angels sing as you approach that Tracker bass boat with the Mercury outboard motor, $156.12 a month. Not that I looked. I often say you approach it with the reverence that you do a bank of urinals at a ball arena, just looking straight forward. You don't turn right, you don't turn left, but I'm standing at the one when they built it here in Colorado. Guy down the way goes, it's beautiful, isn't it? I broke for him and I said, it sure is. I see you got allergies. Yeah, me got allergies too, you know. It's that kind of beautiful. So when your wife sits down next to you this morning, I want you to lean over and go, I love the shoes you're wearing. God gives us some really big shoes to wear. But she has some really difficult ones to wear as well. So those of you young guys that aren't yet married, looking for Mrs. Right, I'm reminded of a phrase that I just think says it well. Then in that case, be the person you're looking for is looking for. Be that man of God, and then look for the wife, not one who's willing to be oppressed, not one who comes under your rule, but the one who says, I love you most of all, except for Jesus, and I love him a little bit more. That is a nutshell of what as our role as a husband and a wife. And with the theme that we've had of muddy shoes, making the most of the messes we make, so many of our messes are our unwillingness to fulfill, simply put, the role that God has given us as husbands and wives. And maybe this will at least set the stage for what I have to share later in the day. Thanks everybody for being here. I thought for sure all of my friends would go, it looks a little snowy, safety first, and I can worship online. Okay, so I'm glad that you're here. You must have been out of communion supplies. Let's have a brief prayer and we'll be dismissed. God, thank you for the time together. I am thankful for safe travel and pray for those who are still out and about. I pray that our time together will be beneficial for all of us, not only as husbands and fathers, but as men in general, to remember what you have called us to be. I'm thankful for the example of Jesus Christ as the perfect husband, that we might attain to be like him in our marriages and in our lives. It is my prayer for all of us, thankfully, in Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, guys.
Quick, if you have